Hi, this is Alan, and it's great to be here with my other amigos, Brian and Darcy. Although we are not together, they are celebrating Canadian Thanksgiving Day, and I'm here down in Arizona trying to get some stuff done over this weekend before I head off for a madcap trip to Australia. Just for a stroll down memory lane, I had gotten to know Brian and Darcy just through their weblogs in the early 2000s as we were all kind of dealing with this concept of learning objects, and we kind of started this informal collaboration. And in July of 2003, we did this EDUCAUSE teleconference, and we were talking about RSS, some things we were all dealing with. And we came up with this presentation called about the fuss about RSS, which was a presentation we did entirely in a wiki. The three of us had actually not all met physically, although actually I had known Darcy from way back when on the DirectL listserv, but it was a great experience to present in this new format, and we developed a real camaraderie that's still going today.
So then in 2004, Brian, Allen, and I had the chance to do another presentation together. And we took the idea of David Weinberger's Small Pieces Loosely Joined and extended that into social software and educational technologies. So what happens if you have little bits of website stuff? We were thinking maybe RSS was the way that everything would be hooked together. Never in a million years could we have predicted all the stuff that's happened since the 2004 Small Pieces Loosely Joined session. So back then, what did we have? Well, really, all we really had were things like blogs, wikis, RSS as a technology to connect them all together, and software, whether it's custom or open source. And then, nobody could have predicted this, but Web 2.0 happened. We had a proliferation of free and web-based applications. There are now tools available for just about any purpose imaginable, most of which are free and can be mixed and matched at pretty much at will. And then there was an evolution. And we went from just trying to connect applications and content to a series of trends that have sort of become possible over the last couple of years. And these trends include things like embedding of content, connecting of people and content, socializing between people, collaborating with people, sharing, remixing, filtering, liberating, and disrupting.
So I'd like to talk a bit now about a lowly thing, a tag, the Embed Tag, a piece of web code that actually has been around for quite some time. I know I used it back in the mid-90s with the first bit of a shockwave multimedia that you could put it into a web page that you would use. The Embed Tag to more or less put media from media you had, or and now what's the norm, media from other sites. You actually stick it inside your own web page, and this is really something that I like to call the YouTube effect, because this was really one of the first sites that really exploited this capability. And more or less, you have your typical, which people know now, your YouTube page, and there's places on the right-hand side of a video where you can copy a link that if you want to just link to this video, you can do that. But embed is a piece of HTML you can copy, and then you can actually use it to insert and put into any other web page. And this is rather revolutionary because for a long time in web technology, websites wanted you to go to their site to look at their content. They wanted you to see their ads or to see their other media. They weren't really interested in you taking their media and putting it into your own page. And YouTube really knocked that model on its butt and flipped things around. And it's used on other kind of sites. And one of my favorite examples is Slideshare, which is more or less YouTube for PowerPoints. Instead of uploading movies to YouTube, you upload PowerPoint or Keynote export as PDF presentations to Slideshare, and it converts it to Flash, and it puts into a nice format that's playable on a web page. But it also offers you on the right-hand side the same sort of embed code. So you can go there, you can copy that, and when you look at it, and there's no reason to really look at it, it's kind of ugly. It's techie stuff, and some of you may know what this is, but there's no reason for you to know what it is. You just copy it to your clipboard, and then you're going to go over to your own website. In this case, I might use, say, Wikispaces, which offers nice features for embedding media into it. And I have a little demo page that sort of shows you how this is done. And more or less, you've pasted in there, and boom, you've got a piece of another site that you can put into your own and put context around it and really make it a useful resource. And this is almost, in some ways, ironically, the kind of the failed dream of learning objects, the fact that we're able to reuse content many times in many different settings that make it reusable. And that's something that the whole learning object movement sort of never really attained to the level that we see people reusing content from YouTube. And now we see it in other sites. So for an example, I recently have been embarking on this crazy project called There Must Be 50 Web 2.0 Ways to Tell a Story. And it's because I knew there were a handful of tools. I had seen things like Slideshare and VoiceThread and a couple other ones that allow you to basically easily assemble pictures, perhaps synchronize it with audio to create a web-based multimedia presentation. So I thought, I wonder if there's like 50 different ways you could do that. And I found out that there are. There's all kinds of tools out there, many more than I really knew. And I not only have my Wikispace concept for this put together with links to all the tools, I put together examples, and I decided, well, I really can't figure this stuff out unless I try to do my own content. So I took a simple story that I had the media for, and I did it in every one of the 50 tools just so I could really understand what the tools could do and what they couldn't do. And I was rather surprised that about 36, which is more than 2/3 of these tools, all offered the ability to take what you created on their site. They create this embed code, and they allow you to stick it into other websites. This is really powerful, and I think it really shifts the way we can use and share media. And it's an important characteristic now that I find I'm looking at as I'm coming across new sites that involve creating content. Do they allow me to take what I've made there and put it into other websites? So I think that's a real key feature to be looking for in these sort of new tools that we're talking about today. Okay, we're going to talk about APIs, why that's important. I'm not even going to explain to you what API is. I can't even remember what it stands for. But what it really means for you and me and everybody else is that the things we do on some websites can be used seamlessly with things we do on other websites. And this is especially meaningful for working with media because we're storing our images on Flickr and PhotoBucket. We're putting videos up on YouTube and Blip, and we're connecting them in places like Facebook. Well, maybe not. I don't really use Facebook. But anyhow, let's walk through an example of how it works. So let's say I've got photos in Flickr. I've got a couple thousand. That's my favorite, but it may not be yours. Anyhow, so I got a picture of me with my new Beagle puppy, Freysa, and that's very nice, and I uploaded it. I actually took it with Photo Booth on my Mac and uploaded it directly to Flickr. That, by the way, uses an API of Flickr that allows my Mac to talk to Flickr and send that picture there. Isn't that cool? But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a really nifty site that I like called Picnic, which is a free online image editor. It allows you to do some basic editing of your images, improvements, add effects, etc. So when I create an account on Picnic, I can also give it my credentials for Flickr, so I can pull my images from Flickr into Picnic. I can also, in Picnic, connect to images I may have on Picasa, Facebook, PhotoBucket, or just something I upload or from a URL. You can bring this into Picnic, and I have here looking at my images to choose from, so I'm going to choose that pretty little beagle picture, and Picnic just has a whole bunch of different editing things I can do, effects, etc. And I can go through a number of them, apply some different effects, and I can add text and put little logos and make it look like it came in a Polaroid. So I got all these neat things that I've done in Picnic, and it's nice there, but what can I do with it? Well, I can actually save this back to Flickr, so I can take all these modifications. I basically made a new image. I've actually done a remix, technically. And then I can save this back to Flickr, as a new image, and now I've got a completely new image inside Flickr that I've edited in Picnic. And this is all enabled by the fact that these websites have these communication channels where they can talk to each other, they can pass media back and forth. And there's other ones out there. A lot of them are doing this. Mixercast is one that allows you to pull in images and video from all kinds of places, put them together on a timeline, and then produce them as sort of a multimedia slideshow video. And this is one of the 50 tools I discovered, didn't really know about when I did my 50 Web 2.0 tools to tell a story. So this is just a taste of what's important, but as you're looking at different websites, keep an eye out for whether they allow you to pull media or resources, or they connect with other ones. It's a very valuable feature that we like to see, and it's in many aspects an example of what we originally talked about as a lot of small pieces, meaning all these different web tools, but there's so many different more ways you can join them together and take advantage of them, and that's what's exciting now that really wasn't there in 2004. So that's my little riff on APIs. A key aspect of social software is an interesting dynamic, and I really wish I could find this reference, but there was someone very profound who talked about the fact that some of the most successful Web 2.0 tools that we know and love are ones that really first start out by giving an individual something that's of benefit, something to help them organize or to arrange or to do something productive for themselves. And then they add tools that almost without much extra effort allow you to extend that and share your own, whether it's tagging or sharing of photos. There's sort of a social effect that by putting your content out there and information about it into a larger pool, it really opens some very interesting doorways. So just to walk through a few examples, and maybe this is things that you all know pretty well, but we'll start out in Flickr. Okay, it's a great way to organize my own photos. I can upload them, I can put them on into sets, I can share them with people, I can associate them with geographic coordinates to geotag them. I have all these great tools to organize my own photos, and if that's all I do with it, that's quite enough. But there's interesting things that happen, because if I tag my photos with keywords that really mean something to me and relevance, I end up developing this tag cloud, and the size of the text, as you know, shows you that there's more pictures in there. So this gives me my own organizational scheme for my pictures. It's still my own personal effect. But if I drill down a little bit more, let's say I go into cactus and I want to see all my photos that I've tagged with cactus. And I've got a fair number because I live in Arizona and there's a lot of cactus here. And again, this is just my own data within Flickr. But that link on the left, see all public photos tagged with cactus, takes you out into the realm of everybody else on Flickr who's used that same tag. And you'll find thousands and thousands of pictures. And here's where you just start finding some amazing discovery paths. And if you follow that link on clusters, it actually takes you to another way of showing you different groups of tags. So I could look at whether it's the tags of cactus that are sort of associated with Arizona or southwestern type things, or more down a path of flowers. And this is where the broader based tagging of many people leads you into a path of discovery. So you can find images, or you can find other photographers, and you might drill down and maybe Rachel Reese, who I don't even know, but I may go into her own Flickr account and say, wow, I really like her photographic style. I may even add her as a contact so I can continually see the kind of photos that she takes, and they come into my own contacts page on Flickr. So again, Flickr has this cascading effect where it does great things for organizing your own information, and then you get this added bonus just by the fact that you're tagging things for your own sake, and if you just step out and explore, you get the wider network effect. Same goes for Delicious, where you bookmark websites that are interest. Here are my own websites that I've been keeping track of. Delicious is my main reference for everything I do. And I may decide to drill down and to look into just the ones I've tagged with games. And that's kind of interesting. But by combining tags in Delicious, which is really interesting, I can even get more fine-tuned and see just within my own bookmarked set collection the ones I've used both of these tags together. Now that's very interesting, but I can actually click that View All button, and I can actually go out wider, and I can see the ones that not just that I have tagged with games and education, but let's say the ones that anyone has tagged with games and education. And then it gets even more interesting because I could pick one, say that Armadillo run, and I drill down and I see it's been saved by 369 people. That tells me it's very popular and it's really interesting. And I can see the kind of notes that people added. And maybe I just get really curious about this user, JBAEDKE. I can't even pronounce your username, but maybe I can go into their account and see what kind of information that this person bookmarks. And as I'm looking in there, I say, wow, they do some very interesting things. I can add them to my network. And that way, when I have my own network page, I am continuously getting a flow of interesting sites that other people are putting into this. And that's what makes Delicious very interesting for its own network effect. Same thing goes for Slideshare, another fabulous site. Basically almost modeled after YouTube, except instead of uploading videos, you're uploading presentation files, and you get the same sort of features. You can tag things. By default, the Slideshare site will automatically show you interesting ones that are related just because they have the same keywords. And then I have my own organizational thing where I have contacts that I've selected, say Brian Alexander or Claudia down in South America, and I can sort of see what latest presentations they've done together. And then as I'm discovering, I can even see this one that Claudia has posted and say, wow, she's got a new presentation here. And this is all, again, the social effect, just because I've decided to list within Slideshare people whose actions and activities that I want to follow, and their actions kind of come and feed to me. So the network effects that happen with all these tools are really colossal. It's beyond even what we had imagined a few years ago, and it's just continuing to increase. So tagging, contacts, friends, the ability to get updates as to what these contacts are doing into your own site is what makes this another compelling overarching feature.
Oh, calendar says I have to have something done for this K to 12 conference. I'm doing with Alan and Darcy. I've got so many more important things to be doing. Phone. Oh, that's the last thing I want to do. Maybe if I just don't answer it, it'll go away. I think they stopped. Hello, this is Brian speaking.
Hey, Brian. I'm responding to your memo here about this new word processing technology you want us to use. What's it called? Google Documents or something like that?
Oh yeah, I sent it to you by Google Docs. I hope that's all right. Have you used it before?
I haven't used it before, and I wanted to call to complain. I don't see why you're using this instead of good old Word.
Well, good old Word. I think we've had different experiences with Word in the past. I personally find Word to be really unwieldy, especially for multiple authored editing of the kind of stuff we're going to be doing, and with other collaborators as well.
Well, it might be unwieldy for you as a technologist, as a geek, but for those of us who are new to technology, Word is a standby. It's universal. It's everywhere. It's easy to use. Kids use it. My parents use it, and they're retired. I'm flabbergasted at having to learn to use a new tool. And on top of that, it's this Google document thing is on the web. I need to open a browser to use it, and I have to be online. I'm not online all the time. I'm over here by the lake trying to read something on my laptop. I mean, I just got to use a laptop, much less having to use some newfangled tool. Yikes. Why do this?
Yikes! You gotta. The why is occurring to me now. Why did I do this? I mean, to just to respond to two of your points. The first one I would say is that when you're using Google Docs, I think one of the things I like about Google Docs in terms of trying new technologies, and I know I'm a geek, I have a way of throwing technology at people, but the basic way that authoring works inside Google Docs is a lot like what you'd seen in Word. Most of the buttons are the same, the commands are the same, and it responds much the same way. In fact, you'll find it's probably a little bit simpler. I do understand the criticism about not being able to be online all the time, and I must admit that's something I'm prone to forgetting now and then. But do keep in mind, at any time, you can export a Google Docs file and actually work at it in good old Word, if you prefer. I guess what I was hoping to accomplish was just that, we might be able to work on this document at the same time without worrying about, you going ahead and making some changes and me making some changes, and then later going through that really arduous syncing process, which always seems to, well, kind of sink me.
Syncing, you mean lining these up so we're all talking about the same thing?
Yeah, like synchronization, so, if you make changes to the document, and I'm working away making changes to the document, and we're not aware of what we're doing independently, it can be tricky to kind of pull those things together and get everything in line. And that's something that having one stable, solid document, whether it's on a wiki, Google Docs, can be quite handy. Tell you what, I'm not going to make you change the world. Like I said, if you can find that download to Word document file, and if you want to work on it in Word and later just import that file or send it to me as Word and let me do it, that's cool. I've been there before. But I really hope you'll take a few minutes and actually try Google Docs out.
All right, maybe I'll try that, just for you.
Okay, goodbye. Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for your open attitude there, pal. Well, the one thing that exchange illustrates quite clearly is, besides resistance to trying new things, which is a natural human's tendency, I suppose, is the power, I think, that you see with Google Docs and other applications of having one central application that multiple collaborators can have access to at the same time. And whether you see that with something like Google Docs, which also has a spreadsheet function, or a wiki, imagine using a wiki instead of a bunch of emails to plan a camping trip, or for that matter, alternatives to Google Docs like Zoho. Before I get too deep into confusing you all on notions of open content and remixing, I should just acknowledge my debt to David Wiley, who's a mentor of mine. He gave a presentation called Openness, Localization, and the Future of Learning Objects. Learning objects is a typically elegant phrase within the education domain. It means resources. And it was a tremendous talk, and I can't recommend it highly enough, and I'd forgive you if you just fast-forwarded through the rest of my section and checked out his talk again. It would be time very well spent. But I guess the question that comes up is, what does open content and remixing mean to educators? Well, first of all, what you need to have open content, open educational content, are discoverable resources. Now, I don't necessarily mean things in a collection, a repository, branded as educational resources, although it can mean those things, but it just really means being on the open web. And being on the open web means having a URL, being able to link to distinct pieces of content. And when you have that, it's amazing how many things open up for you. So for example, linking up standard learning object repositories via federated search is an arduous process, and it requires programming ability. Or you can use something like Google Co-op, which actually allows you to set up a custom search just of the sites you're interested in. And you can embed that search window anywhere you want. And this is just one small example of the kind of thing that becomes really easy to do if you just make your content openly available using open web standards.
And I tell you, every time we come here, damn it, it just gets better and better!
The other big piece about open content is open licensing. And in this regard, there's a lot of different types of open licenses out there. But probably the one that has achieved the biggest uptake is Creative Commons. Which makes it quite easy and straightforward to license your materials and set minimal conditions. And essentially, I like to think of Creative Commons as a badge on the content that essentially tells the world, I'm not a jerk. Go ahead, reuse my stuff. I want attribution. Maybe I don't want you to use this stuff for commercial use. Then again, maybe I don't care. That's one of the things you specify in the license. And it really opens up a lot. And on the user end, it creates the ability to very quickly find stuff that you know you can use without having to get permission to use it, which of course is a very arduous process. So, an example of this would be or ways to find open content. Google's advanced search is a tremendously useful resource, and in fact I find I put on the filtering by license feature when I'm searching for materials, even when I don't plan to reuse those materials. I find that putting this filter on actually tends to make the results that come back more relevant to me, especially within an educational context.
What are you meditating about, dude?
Wait, dude, I'm connecting to the internet with my mind.
Educational context. I think a lot of us for years have been using Flickr's advanced search. It's just a tremendously useful resource, and especially when you consider that I would argue probably the vast majority of pirated resources out there in the educational domain tend to be images. You got 50 million high quality, or many high quality images in Flickr, and many of them with quite powerful educational capabilities. And I would point to this example here, which also uses the note feature within Flickr, which Alan is always so fond of showing.
What are we working for?
Just one more shout out for sources of open educational resources. I really like this site, OER Commons. And among other things, it does allow you to filter for grade level. And there is actually a significant number of resources here for the K-12 domain. The third major condition that I see in terms of being able to kind of join the open education party is essentially the notion of open and remixable formats. And I take a fairly wide definition of this. To me, an MP3, even though it isn't an open source audio format like Ogg Vorbis is, at the least an MP3 can be played in just about any player. I can put it on my portable MP3 player and listen to it on the bus. I can put it on my laptop and listen to it when I want. I can put it into an open source program like Audacity and edit it. If that content, that audio content, is in a real audio streaming format, I can't do any of those things. And I should also note that it's just a lot cheaper to post things as an MP3 and into a podcast stream than it is to set up a real audio stream server.
He has the advantage of editing. Going to edit you so you look foolish. Oh, really?
When it comes to other kinds of content, I can't say enough about the importance for RSS. A lot of people think of RSS as something that you put in your newsreader to keep up to date on weblogs or current events, and it can do all those things very well. But RSS is also a very, very powerful and dynamic remixable format for any kind of content. I love this example from Will Richardson. Essentially a set of resources on Darfur, bringing in Sudanese news sources, world news sources, YouTube videos, Flickr images. And from what I understand, Richardson set this up very quickly. And as I've noted, any piece of content what's in RSS format can be republished in any number of ways. So I like this example. This is a librarian here at UBC, and she was intimidated at the thought of authoring inside WebCT. The other thing was too is that this content on information literacy was going to be used in a lot of different courses. So traditionally, you know, this type of content would get shipped off to some web programmer type person, and they would insert this stuff into 10 different courses, and anytime she wanted to make updates, those updates would have to be made in different places. What's nice about this, she was able to author in Blogger, very simple content engine, and then via a feed to JavaScript program that my colleague here, Alan Levine, was kind enough not only to develop, but to make freely available. You can post it inside WebCT, or indeed anywhere else.
And I know
I would argue too that beyond formats, I think we need a lot of attitude changes in the educational domain. One is this idea that derivative content, as implied by how we think of a word like derivative, is somehow inferior to quote-unquote original content. Originality is a very troublesome concept, and I could probably ramble on at length for about 20 minutes on it, and how incongruous notions of originality are in the electronic domain. I'll resist that temptation, but perhaps we can talk about this during the chat. But that's a huge factor. The other thing I really want to point to is this notion of data literacy. And for that, I'd like to move on, just very quickly talk about this notion of data mashups.
Mashups are often boring.
A data mashup essentially is a website or an application that combines content from multiple sources into something like an integrated experience, usually via this thing called an API, or Application Programming Interface. I don't want to go into too much detail on what an API is, but think of an API. Jack Schofield here, writing in The Guardian, had a really nice breakdown of it. It's almost the equivalent of when musicians release an album and they want people to remix it. They'll release it with the vocals and the guitars and the drums as separate tracks. This was recently done by Brian Eno and David Byrne when they re-released an album that they'd originally recorded back in the 80s. They re-released it with all the bass tracks, all the separate tracks produced separately. So people, of course, could go in, strip out the vocals, put in new vocals, and make it sound very clean and professional. Essentially, when a company releases an open API, they're inviting people to take their services and remix them how they see fit. And companies like Flickr and Google have really embraced this. The one that really opened my eyes to the potential of this approach in terms of data applications was Housing Maps. And what this is doing is it's actually taking Craigslist postings of housing vacancies and overlaying it onto Google Maps. But what's really cool about this is the disclaimer in the top right corner that says this site is in no way affiliated with either Craigslist or Google Maps. And from what I understand, the person who developed this application did it very, very quickly, essentially just slapping the two data sources and mashing them together. I also link here to Programmable Web, which is a really good site if you want to follow this stuff. What's become interesting and why I'm kind of talking about mashups here in terms of data mashups is there's indications that we might be with software development and taking different data sources and mixing them together, maybe where blogging was 6 or 7 years ago. Just like blogging took people like me who had no programming or database skills and gave them the ability to put together reasonably professional websites and just worry about the content and not really worrying about the back end stuff. You're starting to see more and more applications that are trying to do this with data mashing. So you'll see that with Yahoo's pipes, and there was something of the leader in this regard. And I should note, and just to give you a sense of why I think this is going to be a very, very big concept in the coming years on the web, I'll note that Microsoft, Google, as well as Intel and IBM have all come out with services like this that kind of promise a certain kind of drag and drop programming interface that implies a much lower level of programming skill. But what it does require is this notion of data literacy. I'll move on just to keep the time straight, but I really wanted to point to Scott Leslie's 10-minute movie on client-side extensions, things like Grease Monkey, where on the user side, content can be manipulated in some quite powerful ways. And if you don't know what Grease Monkey is, look it up on Wikipedia. I think it'll be worth your time. I'll also note that Facebook, that annoying, horrible platform that somehow manages to suck up about an hour of my time a day, has also really embraced this third-party application framework, although in a bit of a creepy way. And if you're sitting there wondering, why are you talking about mashing together applications? What possible relevance could it have to us as educators? I'll also point to this EDUCAUSE review article on social networking technologies, which I think really points to a lot of the really obvious ways that this approach could enhance student engagement, not only in a higher education campus, but I think any other school. And to give you another example how this stuff might be used, this is a guy who just by a fluke I ended up sharing a room with him when I was in Utah doing some work. He's from Spain. He slapped together this mashup for a high school biology course. And I think it's quite groovy. So as I wind up, I just want to kind of ask a few questions of everyone here. When you produce content for your course online, does it have to be password protected? It seems sometimes we just want to slap these things behind walls as a default. Maybe you're worried about protecting student interactions, but can those student interactions be kept somehow separate from the rest of the content? Can you put a Creative Commons license on it? When you're choosing a content management system for some kind of project, can you make sure that RSS support, not just for news updates or indicating that new content's being created, but actual content RSS feeds itself, be something you do? It's amazing how many content management systems actually have full RSS capabilities, but it's very rarely turned on by the site administrator. So often it's literally just a matter of clicking a box on an administration panel.
You people are dynamite!
Now, as individuals are able to publish content online more easily and effectively, the amount of available resources online is growing exponentially. And with this proliferation of content, we need strategies to help filter and restrict our attention on the bits of content that are relevant to us. Now, concepts like the long tail would show that even something as obscure as a individual student's postdoc work might actually have an audience online, however small the audience is. The power of the internet means you're able to find resources in whatever field you're interested in. Now, the problem with that is there is so much content online, we need to be able to make sense of it all. How do you organize, categorize, internalize the bits of content that are important to you without having to pay attention to all of the other stuff that may not be as important to what you're needing to do? Now, there are three basic strategies to do this. Probably the oldest and most mature is what would be known as an editorial or directory system, where you have a gatekeeper or a group of gatekeepers, and they act to essentially control the flow of news or new content through a community. Members of the community can submit resources to these gatekeepers, to the editors, and if the editors approve of the resource, they write a blurb and put it online. Now, probably the biggest example of that in the technology community would be something like Slashdot, where you have a group of editors, a large group of members of the site, and every day new stories are submitted to the editors. Some are accepted, some are declined. And as things get published, they show up on the front page of the site, and there is a very active discussion on these news items. This works really well for finding new items for news releases, current events, that kind of thing. It's not so good to really filter to restrict on a small topic. Now, another strategy that is also very effective is a network concentrator. Now, this is somebody who is acting as a bridge between multiple communities. Somebody like, for instance, Stephen Downes with his OL Daily newsletter. Stephen is firmly rooted in many different communities, many different realms of content and people. And the power of his OL Daily newsletter is that he's able to connect, forge connections between these different communities. So he might have in one newsletter a post on philosophy, a post on economics, educational pedagogy, open source software, and he is able to make these bridges and connections between the different communities. Very important role, because if somebody is looking just in one particular domain, they're going to miss innovations and interesting things happening in other domains. And the power of these network concentrators or community bridges is that they can bring what would normally be unrelated bits of content. They can bring it together and contextualize it that way. Now, the problem with these first two strategies is that they don't necessarily scale to internet scale. There's only one Stephen Downes, so if more communities need to be bridged, I mean, he's he will eventually become stretched too thin to manage that. There are only so many editors on the Slashdot community website, but there are many more people contributing content. And how can we take advantage of that? And there are strategies using things called social rating systems. Probably the largest example of this would be the Dig online community, where people can submit essentially bookmarks to the system, and other people in the community can rate that bookmark up or down. And as a resource gains popularity, as more people have rated it with a thumbs up, it becomes more prominent on the Dig community. And so that you can actually restrict yourself to look for only important items in a small subset of the Dig community, only for educational videos, only for gadgets, podcasts. You can restrict that way, and you can rest assured that people will be bookmarking the new things, so you're not going to be missing out on these things. And there's also, because there are there's a large number of users in the system, you're going to get a lot of different perspectives. People are going to be adding bookmarks that you might not have thought to add in the first place, and they initially start in one small subset of that community, and as they gain importance or relevance, more people have given them the thumbs up, they become visible in other parts of the community. So these social rating systems are really good in allowing you to group or aggregate essentially the attention of a community in various topics. The power of this is that it scales up. As many people are in the system, that's as many contributors and as many people doing the ratings. So it can, in theory, scale up as large as we want. There are open source versions of this software. There's one called Plig that lets you essentially install your own social rating system on a server. So a campus or a school could very easily set up a social rating system and have all of the students and faculty adding resources and rating things. So these filtering systems perform two very important functions. Probably by far the largest function they perform is discovery, helping people find new resources, news, information, content. So you get to find new stuff, that's great, but the real power of this stuff, and it's something that we're only really starting to see effectively now, is where you're able to harness the power of these filters and do things like restricting searches to only a subset of resources that are deemed important by either a network concentrator or a social rating system. In this example, there's a Yahoo Pipes API-driven application that ties into Delicious. You can feed it the Delicious username of anybody you want, so who is your network concentrator going to be? And then you can restrict an internet search based on items that they've bookmarked. So it's a way of restricting the focus of your search based on the bookmark activity of somebody that you trust. Very interesting stuff happening there. Now, another important trend is liberation. And there are two really important aspects of liberation in the sense of online social software as it pertains to education. The first is freedom to do what you need and what you want. So you're not restricted by what a large corporate IT department is trying to get you to do. This is essentially power to the people. Grassroots efforts by individuals who are able to maintain control of the software and content that they create and use. Now, traditionally, before this movement really started taking off, you'd have to, if you wanted to do any online learning, you had to get something like Blackboard or Desire to Learn or a large corporate learning management system, WebCT for instance. Now there are other options. You can use Moodle. Anybody can install Moodle on any server as long as it can run PHP, and that's pretty much every web server. So anybody with a web server or access to a web server account can install their own fully functioning learning management system without the need for commercial software, IT departments, or restrictions that those entail. Another very important part of the freedom aspect of liberation is portability. Content is transportable between applications, systems, and platforms very easily. You're not tied to one particular application. If you're not happy with how things are working in Moodle, pack your stuff up and go to Sakai or even into Blackboard or WebCT. The idea is that if you use the principles of freedom as it pertains to content, you're able to start with content in a weblog, move it into a wiki, move it into an open source learning management system. It really doesn't matter. The content is yours, and you can move it wherever you want. Very important to keep in mind things like copyright licensing. Creative Commons is very nice for this. The Open Education license is very good. So the idea is to have the individual as the locus of ownership and control, not institutions, organizations, or companies. Now, the other major part of liberation is freedom of cost. A lot of organizations and schools don't have a large budget. So having to allocate significant money to support software means they can't use that money to support activities in the classroom. Now, that's a pretty big disconnect when we're talking about schools and institutions of learning, where the primary activity should be learning, not purchasing software. So open source software that can be installed. There's no charge for the software. You can buy support if you like, but the software is free. The ability to extend and adapt the software. If you find a program that you're using and you need it customized just a little bit, you can hire a consultant, or you can have students actually do this work and customize applications rather than having to wait for a large company to decide that your requirements change are worthy, and then having to find money to pay for that. Examples of open source software that's great for this are WordPress, Drupal, Moodle, MediaWiki, Plone, EduCommons, Joomla, Mambo, Plig, Movable Type, EduSpaces, Typo3, it goes on and on. I mean, there are applications for anything you want to do that are free and open source. If you don't want to be managing your own server, a lot of the same software is available as a hosted service as well. Things like WordPress.com, Dig, PBWiki, Wikispaces, Wikipedia, EduBlogs, Pipes, a lot of these tools are taken care of for free online if you don't want to be managing your own servers. Some of this is advertising supported. Some of it, though, is offered as part of a larger service. Things like Yahoo Pipes, it's really just meant to be making you use their search engines, and that's great because you're still using the content that you want. Some of these tools, though, the hosted services might have questionable business models. How sustainable are they? And that's one of the risks. You're not sure if some small tool that you find online is going to be around 3 years from now. So if you build a lesson around it, is it something that you can rely on being there? And that's where hosting your own software really comes into play, because you can guarantee that you will take care of having that software running. Where if it's some startup where you're not sure how they're paying the bills, why are they offering you the software for free or for whatever charge, you don't know if they're going to be around. Now, the implications of this freedom of cost, anybody with about $7 a month can have a hosting account on a pretty high quality internet service provider, someone like DreamHost or Bluehost or a long list of services. The institution that has really taken this to the extreme in the implementation is the University of Mary Washington, where their innovations are all done on a Bluehost account. They don't have to worry about provisioning servers and acquiring hardware. They just, that's worst case, we need another $7 for another account. And they're using other hosting providers for a lot of the other stuff. Very cool. So with not a lot of money, you can effectively do what traditionally had taken large IT departments and a lot of money and time and resources. So liberation is a good thing. Now, the last trend that we identified is really just the logical outcome of the previous 8 trends. When you have embeddable, portable content connected through APIs with individuals benefiting groups, collaboration, sharing, remixing, rating and filtering, and liberation, what you can wind up with is disruption. Now, disruption can be both good and bad, and you have to sort of take both. You can wind up with these tools with a whole lot of garbage online. So we need tools and strategies to make sense of it and filter the wheat from the chaff. With open content publishing, you get people like the spam roaches, blog comment spammers, wiki spammers. They take advantage of open publishing to try to game the Google ranking system. So we have to deal with the leeches on the open publishing technologies. If you put something out there and allow somebody to freely comment or respond to it, chances are eventually a spammer will find it and take advantage of it. So we need strategies and techniques to deal with that. Otherwise, you spend a lot of money, time, and effort and sanity trying to combat spam, and it really is an arms race going on. where the spammers are in it essentially for money, and the cost for them is very, very low. The benefit can be potentially large if they're able to take over some of these open content systems. So what you can get is something that's very noisy, loud, or busy. So much activity. You have these large social sites, everybody publishing content and reviewing and rating and commenting. It can be a lot to make sense of. So we need to come up with ways to effectively manage that busyness online. There's also a problem. You're not sure if you can trust the people and the content online. For the classic example is Wikipedia. You go to any page on Wikipedia, how do you trust what's on there? Well, that's actually a larger issue. How can you trust what's in Britannica or the other sources either? It's just a little more prominent when you're dealing with these online sources that anybody can edit. So that's some of the bad part of the disruption. Potentially the good part makes it worthwhile, though. You have philosophies and techniques that allow all individuals to be valued. Maybe not equally, but the voice of the students is valued as much as the voice of the teacher, the instructor, the professor. You still have the concept of expert and student, but by having everybody having an effective voice, they become a valued member of the conversation. We get grassroots movements. Individuals are able to work together to build solutions for their needs, as opposed to waiting for things to come down from on high. We can affect real change. The social structures are actually in place for us to communicate more effectively than what we had previously had with mass media, with top-down dead trees paper publishing. We're able to communicate much more rapidly and effectively now, and we're able to document the process. So we can, I think, affect some real change. Now, are we all going to be sitting around a campfire singing Kumbaya? Well, I don't know. We might have some of that. There are precedents for this, though. I mean, we've had small bits of change over the years, and I think given enough time and enough momentum, it actually does build up to real long-term change as well. And one more thing that is both a benefit and a cost of this disruption is this is all a constant work in progress. None of the efforts can ever really be called finished. If everybody is able to effectively publish content and revise it and review and collaborate and discuss and refine, the process never really can be finished. So we have to become comfortable with living in a construction zone. Now, that can be detrimental because construction zones can be noisy and dangerous, but they also mean that progress and change is happening. So I think the cost of having constant change is well worth it.
From now, I live the future. I am the future. What is it gonna be 6 months from now?